Hey friends, my name is Danny and this is Ale and Agony. Welcome on in. Are we going to get cozy? Maybe talk about a little bit of murder. Although actually today's not about murder, but we'll get into that in just a moment. Before we get into today's case, I wanted to say thanks. Thanks you guys, because I found out that we'd surpassed 750 downloads. Isn't that mental? Like, 750? That's a big bloody number, that, isn't it? Like, over 750 times people have listened to this voice. That's mental. That's great. Like, that's so exciting. On to 1,000, eh? Bloody hell. So let's do the use, shall we? Let's start with the ale of this week's episode. And it's not necessarily an ale, it's a beer. I have a Peroni. It's not just any Peroni though. I'll tell you, it's a big boy. It's a 620 milliliter bottle of Peroni. And apparently it was the last one in the corner shop. So lovely. Speaking of the corner shop, I said to Sam, because he very kindly went over and got me a beer, I was like, can I have a chomp or a curly whirly? That's what I had a real hankering for. They had neither. So he got me a double decker, another good choice, because I wanted something a bit chewy. And he was like, I found the smallest little double decker I've ever seen. And I had a look at it, and it's got on it multi-pack, not for resale. Naughty. And as well as that, it went out of date in July. He's just paid full price for a smaller, out-of-date double-decker. I mean, it was delicious, but still. Anyway, so get yourself cozy, because today I'm going to be telling you about the case of Summer Wells. And I'd love to crack it open, but Sam's already opened it for me, so sorry. So I hadn't actually heard about this case until a listener called DY commented on my YouTube video of the Sabrina Eisenberg case a couple of months ago, asking me specifically to look at this one. And at the time, I didn't realise that it was a live and ongoing case. So shout out to DY. Hello, if you're listening or watching on YouTube. Bonjour. So this case is now starting to get some attention. Following on from the Gabby Petito case, others are now asking the public and the media to sort of focus their efforts into this case. Normally, when I record an episode, I've got a script and I would, sort of go through all the facts and, sort of try and go through the story as best as I can, try and make it make sense, go in order and all that sort of stuff. But this one is unusual. Because it's a live case, facts are changing all the time. So instead, I'm just going to read from my notes and have a more sort of informal chat about what's going on and what I found out so far. So if you don't know about Summer Wells, she is a 5-year-old girl and she vanished from her home on June 15th of this year. And I'm recording this the day before releases, the 23rd of November 2021. So 5 months ago, Summer Wells vanished from her home. And we still don't know where she is. Some of the things about this case that are very unusual is that it was 5:30 in the afternoon. So it's bright outside, the sun is shining. Her 3 brothers, her mum and her nan are all home. And Summer apparently vanished literally within a number of minutes. The house that Summer went missing from is not what you would probably have imagined. They don't live in a cul-de-sac. They don't live in a sort of stereotypical area that you would expect. They actually live in an incredibly rural area. So the property that Summer and her family live on is 11 acres. And that's bloody big. I don't really know sort of size when it comes to acreage, because that's just for very fancy homes in the country. So I had a quick look online to hopefully try and help. So 11 acres is 44,500 square meters. and it's equivalent to 7.5 football fields, including the end zones. So it's big, and that's just their property where they are. They're then surrounded by woodland. So the property itself is massive. So I'm going to try my best to walk you through what happened on the day. And this is from her mum's point of view. So we've got 5-year-old Summer, and she has 3 brothers. Her mum is called Candace Bly, and her father is called Don Wells. When she went missing, Don was at work, and Candace was at home, as well as her mum, who is Summer's grandma, because she actually lives on a trailer on the property, along with the 3 sons who were also at home. So according to Candace, they were out quite early in the morning. So she took Grandma, who is also called Candace. It gets a bit confusing, I won't lie, when I was doing research. So you've got Grandma Candace, Mother Candace. She also had a daughter that she called Candace. And it's the same with Don. So Don's dad is called Don. He's Don. His first son was called Don. So I think it's just very common in the area where they grew up that it's very traditional to name your children after yourself. So it gets a bit confusing. So I'm just going to say Candace, as in mum, and Grandma, as in grandma, and then hopefully that'll help. So Candace took Grandma and Summer to go to a doctor's appointment. So she wanted to leave the 3 boys at home, so she left them behind. So 8 o'clock in the morning, Grandma has an appointment. So Candace takes Summer and Grandma over to the doctor's. And then Candace and Summer stay in the car while Grandma's at her appointment. They don't know how long she's going to be, so they're like, we'll drop her off. She can go in, we'll stay in the car. Apparently they just stayed in the car, played on their phones. At around 10:30, so it's been quite some time, Candace says that she received a call from Hunter. Hunter is her old best friend's kid, so she knows Hunter really well. Hunter's kind of like a son to her. He's 15 years old. He said, what you guys up to? And she was like, oh, well, just waiting for, my mum to be done at the hospital, so we're just sort of hanging out outside the hospital. So Hunter said, why don't you come over? So they go to the house at around 11 a.m. They hang out there for a bit, and then Grandma's ready to be picked up. So Candace and Summer get back in the car, and they ask Hunter if he wants to come along. They've got some errands to run. They were thinking about going to the local pool if he wanted to come as well. So he was like, yep, no worries. He got himself some swim shorts and then got into the car. So they went and picked up Grandma from the doctor's. They went to a shop. Apparently, Candace needed to pick up some extra vapes. And then they went to the local Walgreen because Grandma needed to put in for her prescription. That's when they went to what was known as Warrior Park whilst they waited for the prescription. So Warrior Park is where they went. They had a swim. They chilled out for a bit. Apparently, they weren't there for too long. By about 1:30, they went back to Walgreens. They went through a drive-through to get some food, and then they went and did some shopping. So about an hour later, at 2:30, they dropped Hunter back off home. Hunter's mum, Ali, apparently came out to say hello because her and Candace used to be really good friends. Apparently they had a bit of a falling out, so they're not as close as they used to be, but they're still on good terms. So she came out and she saw that Summer was actually asleep in the back of the car. And it's quite a distinctive photo. So Summer is sort of laying on her side and she's on 2 massive gallons. Is it a gallon of milk? 2 big tubs of milk. And she's kind of just laying on them. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I'd sleep anywhere. So that could be fine. Some people have said she looks drugged. That, it's unnatural to be asleep on cold milk. I don't really know, to be honest, but Ali, who's Hunter's mum, did say, oh, it's really weird, she must have really tuckered herself out because she'd always come and say hello, if I went up to the car, she'd always be excited to say hi, and she was just, completely zonked out. At around 3:10, there is a video that they took. So this is where that photo comes from. So Candace, I think, was driving and she got her mother, so grandma, to try and take a video of Summer. Apparently she was sleeping with her arm sort of over and above her head, which is how Dawn slept. And she thought it was really funny. She thought it was cute. So she was like, oh, I want to capture that on video. But unfortunately, by the time Grandma got around to filming, her arm was back down. So they got home and then they put away the shopping. So Candace, Grandma and Summer apparently started planting some flowers. So once they're all done with planting flowers, it's time to go get some dinner. So everyone goes back inside. Candace has got to help her mum with a knee brace. So Summer goes in. She tells the boys to keep an eye on Summer. And then she literally pops next door to the caravan, which is where her mum is staying. So she helps her on with her knee brace. And then apparently only a couple of minutes later, she's done. So she goes back home. She goes in, she sees the boys. Apparently they're at the TV. And she doesn't see Summer. So she's like, hey, where's Summer? And the boys say, oh, she's gone downstairs to the basement because the basement was kind of like a playroom for the kids. So she was like, no worries, perfectly normal. She opens the basement door, shouts down, and doesn't get a response. And she does say that's odd because Summer always responds when she's called for. So she's like, that's odd. So she pops down and she can't find her. So she's like, shit, where's Summer? So it's 5:30 and her instant reaction is to call Don, who is Summer's dad. I don't know whether or not, like Candace doesn't elaborate and say, oh, I went out the back door, because there's a door in the basement that goes straight to outside. She doesn't say, oh, I went outside, I shouted for her, I sort of went around the property a little bit. She was just kind of like, I went down to the basement, she wasn't there, I immediately called Don. So Don said he was working late, and there was some really odd comments made at the time. So Don recalls that when he pulled into the property, so he left work straight away, he pulled into the property, he saw his 3 boys, and he said he just knew that Summer had been abducted. It's just a really odd thing to sort of come out with, because they live in such a rural area, as they've said, they're literally in the middle of fucking nowhere. So you've got bears, there's coyotes, there's all sorts of stuff. And I know that her mum said she's really good, she never runs off, she knows better than that. I'm sure she does. I knew better than to do certain things when I was younger. I have a very vivid memory of being in Woolworths, RIP to them, they no longer exist. But I remember I was on the outside of the escalator and I held on to the handrail, and then I remember it slowly pulling me up and I was on my tiptoes, and then all of a sudden I was just going up and my feet were off the floor, and I got to the point where I couldn't let go because I was worried that I'd break my ankle. And I don't know how old I was, but I remember I was getting to the point where my hands were going to get squished. So I was freaking the fuck out, and I was screaming and crying, and luckily this man grabbed me. But I know better than to do something like that, because that's fucking dumb. So I'm sure that someone knows better than to go running off into the woods where there's bears and coyotes and all sorts of things. But that doesn't mean that she didn't make a mistake. Doesn't mean that she didn't go. But it was just odd that his instant reaction was, she's been abducted. Another, odd thing that was said. So Don's like, right, she's been abducted. He then went to human trafficking. And so people were like, maybe she fell. Maybe she got lost. And he's like, no. He said he always knew that something would happen to Summer. And he doesn't think that she's alive. And he'll see her again during the resurrection. Isn't that really odd? That's just a really bizarre thing to just sort of come to terms with supposedly very quickly. And I know that people grieve in different ways, but, as he's saying these things, he doesn't appear to be upset or anything. He's just, very sort of factual. I always knew this was going to happen to Summer. No, I knew it was going to happen. I could just feel it in my bones. I'll meet her again one day. No big deal. So, although Don called the police, so he called 911 when he was on his way home. He then went quite heavy on social media. So he was posting everywhere about it. And rather than it helping the case, it more hindered it, because unfortunately there's a lot of issues and very questionable backgrounds to the family that were all of a sudden coming to light. So people are much more heavily focused now on the parents rather than on Summer. So I'm going to go into the background of what I know of Candace and also what I know of Don, just to hopefully give a bit more of an idea of what kind of household Summer was growing up in, what kind of things were potentially going on. So what I know about Candace is when she speaks about Summer, she does say very lovely things. If you watch any kind of interview with her, in the very beginning, you can tell that she may not be particularly well educated, which is obviously not a bad thing in the slightest. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean that it is what it is. She comes across as quite slow, but as the interviews progress, it looks almost as if she's heavily medicated. She's so slow and she's so slurred. She barely says words. Like, it takes her an age to blink. Like, she seems so spaced. So she gets a lot of backlash for just looking high all the time, essentially. As I said, when she talks about Summer, she says things like, she's an angel. She was a blessing. She was the love of our lives. She goes on to say that, Summer was a daddy's girl, that she used to be the boss of the boys. She loved to play. She had lots of lovely positive things to say about Summer. And what we know about Candace's beginning is quite limited at this point in time. So what I do know is that Candace was born with a defect. She had a hole in her heart. And she grew up in Wisconsin. When she was 19, she ran away and became a carny. So she literally ran away and joined the circus and became a carny. So she was 19 years old and she fell for a 42-year-old man called Andrew. They got quite serious and they had a son and a daughter together. So this is where Candace's first daughter, Candace, comes in. I don't know whether the son was called Andrew as well. Who knows? Maybe. What she would say about Andrew, so, she's 19. She's fallen for this much older man. And I'm assuming, being a carny, it's probably quite fun, but I wouldn't imagine it's particularly stable for, like, raising your kids, trying to find, school and all that sort of stuff. It must be a bloody nightmare. But she said that Andrew was very controlling over her, and he forced her to do substances. He would say to her, I will take the kids away if you don't do this. So she then started to get quite heavily addicted to substances. But over time, things got really bad. Her children were actually taken away from her. So when her son was 2 years old and when her daughter was 6 months old, both of them were taken away. It was when the 2-year-old son was beaten so badly with a baseball bat that he now has lifelong disabilities and he has to have a carer at all times. That's like a shit relationship and start to your life. So, you've grown up, you think you've fallen in love with this older man, and then, you have these kids, and then it's just shit, isn't it? Like all the drugs and then the kids being taken away. Like, imagine, I can't imagine, but it can't have been easy. And I'm not saying, woe is fucking Candace. Like, nah, not saying that. Just, must have been difficult for her on some level. Another unusual thing about Candace that does come up is that her sister Rose is also a missing person, which is just bizarre, isn't it? There's not much that we know right now about Candace, which is why, there's not much I can tell you. But the fact that her sister has been missing since 2009, and now her daughter is also missing. Like, what are the chances of, I don't know, say you right now, right? Your mum, she's gone missing. She's disappeared off the face of the earth. No one knows where she is. Like, police can't solve it. No ideas. And then, a decade later, your brother goes missing, disappeared off the face of the earth. No one knows what happened to them. You'd feel like someone's out to get you, surely. I would start feeling like, fuck me. Someone is targeting me. They are taking away my family. That's just bizarre, isn't it? How is that possible? So the story with Rose is that apparently she was going to a bar back in 2009, and then she was just supposedly abducted on the way to the bar. She was going to meet some friends and then just fucking disappeared. Gone. So Candace went on to meet Don, and they moved onto his mum's property. So that's the 11 acres that they live on now. They had 4 kids together, so they had Summer. And then when Don's mum passed away, she left the property to Don. So that's how they've now acquired that massive 11 acres. But things weren't always that great, unfortunately. So when you listen to them in the news media, they kind of say that it's a loving home, it's a safe home, Don's a great dad, Candace is a great mum, blah, 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 blah. There is, however, back in 2020, there was an order of protection that was requested by Candace. So apparently there was an assault. Don hit her. So she put in for an order of protection. Apparently Don was really drunk and he came home and he thought for some reason that Candace was cheating on him. So I'm going to read what the actual documentation says. So what Candace wrote was, "He drinks and throws things. I'm afraid of being hurt. He is abusive physically and mentally towards me. I am afraid for my children and myself. My mother fears he is going to hurt her because she is staying in her camper on the property." So that's what she put forward. It was later dismissed. Candace actually approached the judge and said that she made a mistake. Her and Don were gonna work things out, so she actually took all of that back. And when I said earlier that Candace appears to be sort of lesser educated, that is quite apparent in the documentation here because there's a lot of unusual misspellings on certain things. When she writes the word fear, it's F-E-I-R. And then when she writes mentally, it's M-I-N-T-I-A-L-Y. So I think that potentially what happened was, Candace was 19, she was impressionable, she got taken on by this older guy, got into some shit she didn't need to get into, and I think it probably all just spiraled from there, to be fair. So we've gone into Candace as much as we can. The main backlash from everything that's happened is actually a lot of his past has now come up. So his family have been very vocal about what has happened with Don. So Don has some stepsisters. So he has a stepsister called Mary and a stepsister called Jeannie that I'm aware of. They're the two that have spoken out the most. So Mary's mum used to babysit Don, and then she started to date Don's dad, who was also Don. So again, I know I'm really sorry. So Don Sr., who is Daddy Don, started dating the babysitter. Either way, stepsisters are now in his life, and he's quite young at this point. Jeannie, who is the youngest stepsister, she recalled that when her mum met older Don, she was excited because they'd always lived in a trailer, and she heard that Don Sr. lived in a house. So she was like, excellent, I get to live in a house. So she was super excited. When the day came for them to move, she was like, yes, I'm there, I'm ready, let's do this. So the first night in the house, she was so excited. So at the time she was 5 years old and Don was 12 years old. On the very first night, he started to play a game with 5-year-old Jeannie. And this is a game that I remember playing when I was in secondary school, and I'm sure it still happens now. And I remember I didn't like it. We used to call it frigid. And what you would do is you would start to run your hand up the inner thigh of someone else, and you'd go really slowly until they said stop. And basically the aim was to get your hand as high as possible. Obviously, it's grim. And yeah, I was labelled as very frigid because I did not like that game and I would not allow it to go very far at all. Not for me, thanks very much. So 5-year-old Jeannie felt exactly the same, as I'm sure you can imagine. She said that she never liked doing it. She would stop Don halfway and he would say, no, you can't stop yet. And Don did have, he had some trouble before that as well, just to jump back a moment. So apparently when Don was 5 years old, he burned down a barn on his dad's property and it was full of animals. So there was loads of barnyard animals in the barn and he was pissing around with some matches and set the whole fucking thing on fire and loads of animals died. He's got quite a troublesome past. He's setting barns on fire. And at 12 years old, he's playing frigid with his 5-year-old step-sister. So the years go by. Jeannie's now 7 and Don is 14, so he's literally double her age. She said that he used to quite often sneak in her room and Jeannie wouldn't give a lot of details, which is completely fair enough. But she said it got to the point where she would put on multiple pairs of pants. She hoped that if she wore sort of 5 pairs of pants, it would sort of deter him, stop him from doing whatever it was he was doing. Don said that if she tells anyone, then he would die. And then he also said that if she told anyone, that the whole family would die. And she's 7. She's tiny. I'm pretty sure at that age, I remember my sister telling me, she pointed out the window. And you know when you look out and there's a really, really bright star, and it's probably a satellite. She pointed at one and she told me that in a certain number of years, I can't remember how many, basically the reason it was so bright is because it was getting closer and in a certain amount of years, it would hit Earth and everyone would die. And then I was absolutely fucking petrified. And I cried so much about thinking that everyone was going to die. So this poor 7-year-old was told, if you tell anyone, I'll die and the whole family will die. So she probably believed it. There was a particular night where Dad, Don, so Don Sr., actually came into Jeannie's room and caught Don in there with her. And he said, oh my God, I must be sleepwalking. Oh, wow, that's weird. And Jeannie was like, fuck yeah, I'm saved. This is never going to happen again. Like, my dad has seen this. Because that's the nice thing. They used to refer to Don Sr. as dad. They never call him stepdad or Don. They'd always be like, dad. So she was like, my dad knows what's going on. He's seen it. This is going to stop now. But that's not the case. It continued to happen because, you know, little dickhead over there was like, oh, I must have been sleepwalking. How weird. Fucked off to his own room and then continued again the next night. Mary, who is the older stepsister, she also once made a police report against Don and 2 of his friends. Apparently, her mum and Don Sr. were out and about. I think they were gone away for a weekend or something. So Don Jr. threw a party and had some friends over. They chased Mary around, and when they caught her, they pinned her down and started ripping her clothes off. She said that she got to the point where she was able to escape and she locked herself in her mum and dad's bedroom. She knew that her boyfriend and her brother were on the way back, so she basically just waited out, and then when she heard them arrive, she shouted them up. So she went to the police station and she made the report against Don and his 2 friends. But the next day, her dad took her back to the police station and made her revoke that report, and he said that he didn't want his son going to prison. What he said was, if you go ahead with this police report, it will destroy the family. So you've got Mary, who's had this one instance, old enough, brave enough to go to the police, and then her own dad and her own mum are both like, no, sorry, can't do anything about this. You'll destroy the family. So she has to then take it all back, which is awful. And then you've then got Jeannie, who's going through all of these years of abuse. She recounts when she was 10 years old. Jeannie said that Don had gone to prison and she was relieved. She was like, this is over. I've got a break. Excellent. As the years went by, it was only 2 years before he got home. And everyone was saying, oh, Don, he's changed. He's been in prison. And, I have, my older brother's been in prison a lot. And you always go through that phase of when they get out, they're this new person. They want to start fresh. They want to get a job. They want to get somewhere to live. They've got all these plans. It's an exciting time. You get into this whole, oh my God, everything's changed. They're a wonderful person. So you do sort of like fall into that. So that's what happened with Jeannie. She still wasn't even a teenager yet. So she had a couple of years to sort of, get past it. And then she got sort of enthralled with the family, being like, oh, he's got so much better. Everything's great. Like, I'm excited for him to be home. He's a better person now. And then the very same night that he got home, he went into Jeannie's room and it started all over again. But this time, Jeannie had had enough. She'd had 2 years without this shit. So she went and told her parents and they went to find Don, but he'd done a runner. He knew that Jeannie was going to tell the parents and he was like, oop, shit. So he went on the run. This is when Jeannie's mum and Don Sr. finally got divorced because Jeannie's mum was like, this is enough. We need to press charges against your son. But Don said, no. If you press charges against my son, I'll divorce you. And she was like, fine, fuck you. Because, she'd already gone through this with Mary, with the whole police report being revoked. And now Jeannie is coming in saying, this has happened. It's been going on for, literally years. So she was like, okay, let's get a divorce. See you later. Okay, bye. So luckily, Jeannie and Mary, didn't have to live with Don anymore. He was gone. See you later. So Don ran off and then he turned to drugs and he met a lady called Pamela in a meth house. How romantic. And they had 2 children, one of which was called Don, obviously. So the kids were widely known to be heavily neglected. And despite everything that happened between Jeannie and Mary in particular still stayed quite close to Don. She said in reports that she would often go around the house and she was aware that Pamela basically wasn't very good at housekeeping, is how she put it. She was like, she's not really equipped to be a parent. Turns out that Pam had like 6 kids before and they were all removed from her for lots of different reasons. So she was kind of like, these kids are in my family. I need to go over. So she used to pop over, change diapers. She said she used to clean them. She said that they were so heavily neglected. She did say that later on they actually called CPS, which is Child Protection Services. They didn't do anything apart from they eventually put Pam on a parenting class. I don't know why Don wasn't put on one of those, but apparently he was not. So that's what happened. Apparently CPS would get more reports, so they would go and check on the family, but when they'd go, they'd moved. They'd just up and move. See you later. And at one point, Mary actually tried to adopt the daughter. She knew that they were, struggling with money, with all the meth and all the good things. So she was like, I tell you what, I'll give you some money. I'll give you some money. You give me the kid. And then everyone will be happy. Apart from the son, obviously. I don't know what the plan was with the son. He can fend for himself, apparently. But Pam wouldn't let go of all contact. So the whole thing fell through. Mary was very much like, if you give me this kid, if I pay for this kid and we sign these documents, you're not to speak to them. And Pam was like, yeah, but I want to though. So it all fell through. Pam then caught Don in the streets on 25th Street in Ogden. Apparently it's quite a renowned place. I don't know. 25th Street. He was stood there with his son and trying to sell him for substances. He was trying to sell his own son because he needed drugs. He was off his face that hard that he was trying to sell his son. Like this poor kid, not only was his sister offered up for adoption, we'll take the sister, but we won't take you. And he was then taken off onto the street by his own dad. And then he could have been sold to fucking anybody. Isn't that terrifying? luckily it didn't happen. Luckily everything was fine. Thank fuck for that. But Don was just like, he needed money. Like, he was so heavy into meth. He was like, I need money. And so he'd steal anything he could get his hands on, basically, from all the family. He'd steal lawnmowers and tools from the sheds. He stole wedding rings from the family, VCRs, TVs. And I have an uncle who was a big heroin addict. He's not with us anymore. But I recall my nan telling me that he used to break in and he used to steal her jewellery and then he used to go and sell it. And it's so common. It's like, apparently you're that desperate. Like, you just need that money. So you'll literally take it from the people that love you the most because it's easy. So you'll be like, there's just a little switch that flips off and it's like, no, that's mine now. I really need the drugs. It's just mental. So Jeannie originally came forward with her story when she found out that 5-year-old Summer was missing. She recalls that she was 5 years old when everything started happening with Don. So Summer's gone missing. She comes forward to the police and she recounts her story. Mary said that her initial reaction was that Don was involved in the disappearance. She's not 100% sure anymore, but her initial reaction, gut reaction, was Don's got something to do with this. Don then went on to say in an interview that he did have a relationship with Jeannie, remembering that she was 5 and he was 12. He said it was consensual. He said, she is as guilty as I am. He said, we had a relationship when we were younger, but Jeannie wanted Don out of the picture when she started dating her cousin. And he said, she would play with my thing and I would play with hers. The fact that he says that that was a consensual relationship and she is as guilty as I am, when at the very oldest, she was 12, is just sick. Absolutely sick. And that's not him being misconstrued. That is a recording of him saying those words. It's out there. I'll link it. He full on is just like, yeah, I can talk about that. Well, it's not a big deal. You know, it was consensual. She was as guilty as I was. She was 5. So Don recalls on the morning that Summer went missing. He woke up and she was in his bed when he woke up for work. So apparently it was quite normal for Summer to stay in his bed. Make of that what you will. I don't think that's appropriate, given everything that we now know. In later interviews, Don was also asked, do you think that the person deserves to be in prison? And he said, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And he said, I don't know if I could do that. It depends on the circumstances. So someone has taken his child, done fuck knows what. We don't know if she's alive. We don't know if she's dead. And his reaction is, I don't know if I could do that. It depends on circumstances. He also said, quite proudly, that he had the good idea to pose as a child molester to try and catch whoever it was that took away his daughter into the child sex trafficking ring, because that's what he thinks it is. So there's that as well, you know, very much wanted to play dress up as a child molester. So that's fun. There was also another really bizarre thing that happened. So after everything that's happened, so it's now been quite some time, and Candice calls Mary. She calls Don's stepsister, and she starts crying down the phone to Mary. She says that they took Don away and they wouldn't say why. And she said that it was all Jeannie's fault. She said it was all Jeannie and her friend's fault that Don's been taken away. She said that they're taking him to Boston. She said, I'm all by myself. I'm all on my own. She's absolutely hysterical, like choking back tears. Like she sounds like she can barely breathe. Mary is just apologizing. She's like, I'm so sorry that this has happened to you. I'm so sorry. Like, I wish I could be with you. And then Candice goes on to mention some mafia stuff. Apparently, she said, Don came into $80,000 over the Mexican mafia and they're going to kill him. The drug cartel know where I am. Like, this is all voice recordings. This is all a recorded conversation that was had with Mary. And I'm just like, is she high? Is she high? I don't know. Because this was all bullshit. It was all a fake call. Don was actually in the room with her, and apparently, allegedly, he made her make that phone call to his stepsister. And I just don't understand it. I really don't. Like, why would you talk about the mafia? Why would you talk about the drug cartel? Like, your child is missing. What the fuck are you doing? This whole case is just fucking weird. Really weird. There's another part as well, and I'm sorry, I know I keep flip-flopping, but everything is so all over the place, and that's kind of how I have to tell it, unfortunately. But there was another point where Don said, my eldest has been raped multiple times. She dealt with it. I give her props for that. She didn't cry about it. I don't know what that's in. What is that? What's that got to do with anything? Does she want everyone to know that she's been raped multiple times? Probably not. I think that's probably a horrific thing. I don't think she wants everyone to know about that. Like, shut the fuck up. They won't go on major news stations and talk about it, but they'll post all over social media. They've got their own YouTube channel where they post short videos about their life. And one of their most recent things is they actually went on Dr. Phil. So, I mean, I watched the whole thing on YouTube, and I'll link it for you as well. And when I said earlier that Candace was getting pretty bad with, the slurring and the slow blinking and all that sort of stuff, in this interview in particular, it's really bad. I don't know who upped her meds or decided it was a good idea for her to go on TV in the state that she's in, because it's so noticeable. It's just like, it's not a good look. The interview did them absolutely no favours whatsoever. Dr. Phil goes on to say that, I say Dr. Phil. Phil, I don't know what his first name is. Mr. Phil, he's not a doctor, is he? So Mr. Phil says that 2 distant relatives came out saying that they believe that Don gave Summer away. And at first you're like, fucking hell, shut up, that's ridiculous. And then you think about the fact he actually tried to sell his son, and you're like, maybe. They called TBI, which is like the FBI, but for Tennessee. Tennessee? I'm pretty sure it's Tennessee. And they said that Don killed her. It is the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Good for me. Snaps for me. As I watched it, I did write some notes. So I put, Candace looks exhausted. Slow speech. Pauses. Eyes are squinted slightly. Slow blinks. That's when she said that, Summer was a daddy's girl and blah, blah, blah. And Phil asks them quite a lot of questions, and they basically give him sort of one word, no further explanation answers, which is quite frustrating to watch, to be honest, because, you're expecting to tune into this big news thing, and, you're expecting the family to, really be fighting their corner because, they've been slandered all across the media, and they just seem bored. Like they don't want to be there. They've had enough. So when they ask, do you suspect anyone close to the family? It's just like, no, can't think of anyone. And it's like, you gonna elaborate on that? No one? Not one person? Nothing? Just no, can't think of anyone. It's also confirmed that, I think it was probably confirmed before this, but it was during this particular interview that I realised that the 3 boys have now also been taken away by Child Protection Services. There's a few reasons as to why people think that is. There is some footage of the home, and it's not great. It's very cluttered. There's just stuff everywhere. Like, the sides are just all covered in all sorts of stuff. Whether it's, food, toys, whatever it happens to be. It's just, it's quite manic. As well as that, you've then also got, the 2020 allegation of Don assaulting Candace and her feeling like she's in danger and her kids are in danger. But Don claims that the actual reason that the kids were removed is because of all of the online threats that they were getting. So everyone knows where they live. It's all been posted all over the media. So, he said that CPS have removed the kids, and he's glad that they have, because they're in danger where they are right now based on what people are saying online. When asked again about, who could it be? It's your job to tell us, you need to think about what's going on here. You need to, think about what's going on, blah, blah, blah. Again, can't think of anybody, not that I'm aware of, like all of that kind of language. But then Don then says that he fired a guy once for being on meth. So he seems quite proud of himself. He's like, yeah, I fired a guy once for being on meth. And then the very next day, Summer disappears. And it's like, huh? That came out of nowhere. Just can't think of anybody. No one comes to mind. Well, I did fire this guy that was on meth. And he swore revenge, and then all of a sudden, the next day, my kid's missing. That's weird. But apparently the guy has a solid alibi, so it's just like, that's bizarre. What's going on? We don't know anything. I think this is the thing. It's like I've been waffling on now for nearly an hour, and I don't have any information. I've got nowhere to go. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Based on the information that I've read, I think, I can't help but think that Don's involved. Like, how could he not be based on everything that's come out about him? Like, he, sexually assaulted his 5-year-old stepsister. He tried to sell his own son. And now his 5-year-old daughter's gone missing. And no one knows where she is. It's just bizarre. So there are some bits that I'm going to read for you, which is the last of the information that I have at this point in time. So this is from the TBI, which is the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations. This was as of 13 days ago. Nothing new has come about, unfortunately. So I'm searching all the time, trying to find out, has she been found? Has anything else progressed? Nothing so far. So I'm hoping that if I just read this to you, maybe if you've got some questions in the back of your head that I clearly haven't answered because there's not a lot to be told. I believe at this point in time, they're keeping a lot of information close to their chest because it's such a fresh case. I think that there's a lot that they know that they're not telling anybody. I'm hoping that this will help. So as per the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, these are some frequently asked questions. So, when was Summer last seen? Her mother reports last seeing her on the afternoon of June 15th, 2021 at their home. In order to preserve the integrity of the investigation, we will not provide additional information regarding the timeline. Have you searched the home and property around the residence? Yes, more than once, including the basement, crawl space, all vehicles, outbuildings, barrels, and other items located on the property. Additionally, K9 teams specialising in a variety of search methods have also been utilised. And just as I remember regarding K9s, something else that happened was that Hunter's mother, Ali, said that on the property there was around 20 dogs. Apparently they had dogs on the property. They didn't get them spayed or neutered, so they just had puppies all the time. And they were very loud. They were quite feral. So if someone came up to the property that they didn't know, they would bark a lot. So the fact that someone went missing, apparently someone took her, and no one, not the 3 boys, not the mum, not the grandma, no one was alerted by the dogs, is another weird thing. Anyway, back to TBI. Have you searched the phones and computers belonging to the Wells family? Yes. Working alongside the Hawkins County Sheriff's Office and the FBI, numerous subpoenas and search warrants have been obtained, resulting in any available digital evidence being collected, searched, and documented, and this includes social media accounts. Have you searched the flower bed? So because they said that they were planting flowers when they got back. They said there was not a flower bed. Summer's mother and grandmother stated that she was planting flowers with them shortly before she was last seen. The flowers were planted in pots, and yes, the pots were examined. Have you searched waterways in the area? Yes. Dive teams were brought in to search bodies of water in the area. Have you conducted aerial searches? Yes. Numerous searches from the air have been completed, especially during the first few weeks after Summer went missing. Additionally, drones have been used to map the area and to pinpoint bodies of water as well as any other points of interest. Will additional searches be conducted? Investigators will continue to search points of interest as they are developed, as well as follow up on tips regarding Summer's whereabouts. Have you collected and reviewed surveillance video? Yes. We've collected surveillance photos and videos from a variety of locations. Additionally, the entire area was canvassed in an effort to locate any residential cameras that weren't voluntarily reported. Please keep in mind that the Beech Creek area of Hawkins County is very rural, with few businesses and no traffic cameras. Have you questioned the parents? Yes, both have been questioned. Have you questioned neighbours and searched their properties? Yes. Have you questioned registered sex offenders in the area? Yes. Is there evidence that Summer was abducted? None that we've developed at this stage. Is the FBI involved? Yes. They've been involved since the Amber Alert was issued. Additionally, in the first week, the FBI Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team responded to the area. FBI agents continued to assist with the investigation. There was also some information released about a Toyota truck that didn't really go anywhere. So I haven't mentioned it, but in case you've heard about it and you'd like an update, they say, why did you release information about a Toyota truck? An individual who travels through the area regularly as part of his job stated that he recalls possibly seeing a 1998 to 2000 maroon or red Toyota Tacoma with a full bed ladder rack and white buckets in the trunk bed. The individual stated that the truck might have been parked in the area of Beech Creek Road and Ben Hill Road in the late afternoon to early evening on either Monday, June 14th or Tuesday, June 15th. That vehicle was not captured on surveillance cameras. In an effort to cover all bases and identify the driver, the TBI, in agreement with the Hawkins County Sheriff Office and the FBI, released the vehicle description. Our hope was that the individual might have some information that could help the investigation. The driver has not come forward, nor have the hundreds of vehicles reported to us as matching the description panned out. So at this point in time, essentially, they've looked through the entire area and we don't have any further information. So I'm hoping to obviously update you as soon as anything comes about on this, because this is just mental. So what you can do is, if you've got any information, or if you see Summer, or if you hear anything about it, then you can direct all tips and potential information to the Hawkins County Sheriff Office, which is at 423-272-7121, or you can contact the TBI at 1-800-TBI-FIND. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that, Don's got nothing to do with it. I just don't know really how it could go another way, just based on the information that's out there. But obviously, people are just going to want to slate and get all the juicy gossip out, aren't they? So it's one of those things, all the shit stuff is going to come out, unfortunately. And as I say, the majority of it has been regarding the parents and not Summer. So the majority of the information out there is about Don, really. A lot of the pictures that you may see of Summer, she'll have long blonde hair. In reality, she's actually recently had her head shaved. There's a few reasons that they've said that this is. Apparently, she wanted to look like her brothers, so they shaved her head. Apparently, she wanted to look like her mum, so she shaved her head. Another common thing is that they had head lice, so it's really common just to shave everyone's head. So Candace has a shaved head, or did sort of at the very beginning, as did Summer and all the boys, and I believe Don did as well. So it's quite possible that they basically just shaved all their heads because of lice. And that, my friends, is the current live case of Summer Wells. If I get an update, I'll post it immediately over on Twitter or Instagram. I might do an extra episode once something is available over on Patreon. But let's take it back to the beginning. And how was my ale? Well, I mean, it's Peroni, so it's good, isn't it? Who doesn't enjoy a good Peroni? And I've only had a quarter of it. I've just been babbling on. This is going to be a bastard to edit down. Like an hour? Fucking hell. I don't think I've ever gone this long. Jesus Christ. In the episode show notes, I'll pop some links to the interviews that I've seen online, along with the Mr. Phil episode, if you'd like to watch that as well. I'll obviously also post some photos and some further information over on Instagram. And you can catch me on Twitter as well, both under Ale and Agony. If you would like to support the show and you have some spare cash and you want to throw it at me, then you can find me over on Patreon at patreon.com/aleandagony. And I realised the other day that if you search for Ale and Agony on Patreon, it doesn't come up. And I contacted them and was like, excuse me, why is it not coming up? And apparently because I have stated that it's adult content. which it is, because it's about death and really gory things. So I've contacted them and been like, well, if you search true crime, lots of other like true crime podcasts come up that talk about the same sort of stuff. So have they not flagged it? Should I not? Have I been overcautious? I don't know. So if you Google search Ale and Agony Patreon, you can find me that way. Or if you go to the flow page in my Instagram or Twitter, then you can also find it there if you're that desperate to give me some money, which I would really fucking appreciate. Thank you so much. I post on there every Monday with some cheeky bonus content, whatever that might be. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, whatever I fancy at the time. But if you can't support the show with that dollar bill, you can support me in lots of ways for free, including leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. Because I saw that in this last month, I've had 38 listens on Apple Podcasts, and I've only got 2 reviews. Sort it out, will you? Bloody hell. But seriously though, it does really help because it bumps me up the list of true crime. So if people search for true crime on Apple Podcast and there's a few reviews for mine, Apple will be like, oh, people like you, we'll put you to the top of the list. So that'd be great. If you can't do that because you don't have an iPhone or you just don't want to, then that's fine. You can share the episode with a friend. Text someone now, let them know. Or you can mention me on social media. Mention me in a story, mention me in a tweet, whatever you like. And I would of course be super grateful for any feedback. And if you have any requests or stories that you'd like to share, you can contact me on aleandagony@gmail.com. And excitingly, last week I had my first one. Oh, I got my first email. It was very lovely. I was like, oh my God, I've made it. The fact that someone stayed to the very end of the episode and just listened to me waffle on for so long and then was like, do you know what? I will email you. Thank you. That means a lot. And thank you for spending this time with me. I'm sorry that it was all over the shop. Well done on getting through to the end. I will catch you in 2 weeks on the next episode. Goodbye, my friends.